probably is. So Eric, let's see if I've got control. Thank you all for coming, by the way. Beautiful day to be in Albany. Yeah? All right, my wife tells me I'm loud, so can everybody hear okay? I want to be sure. Folks in the back? No, all okay? Anytime, let me know if I get too quiet. But this is the way I usually talk. It's probably why my wife tells me I'm too loud. So, all right. So, Doreen, thank you for the introduction. One of my favorite quotes because it helps get things so framed up. Who am I? Why am I here? And this came from a fellow that's named James Bond. So those of you who remember the 1992 election, this is James Bond Stockdale. He's one of the most decorated American naval commanders. I think he was an admiral, correct? Rear Admiral Stockdale. So it was a good way to get started. I've had a long career in computers and software and embedded systems. I've been a volunteer at HTR, which is a not-for-profit organization since someplace in the mid-90s. I'm an entrepreneur. I've had 4 companies that I might tell you I started up. There's probably a few others that I don't talk about very much. I became an HTR staff member in 2009, and I manage a facility in Rochester. It's called the Rochester BioVenture Center. One of the other roles I have is a HTR Technology Commercialization Program Developer. So based on the experience you're going to hear about here, I've developed some new programs that we're launching in Rochester later this year, and to the extent that you can engage in things like future pre-seed workshop, we'd love to have you. All right. I mentored some researchers that are at the University of Rochester Department of Optics, in particular Dr. Janique Rowland, and Janique is there in the green sweater. And world-renowned for the work that she's done in optics, and she wanted to commercialize some of the work that she and her PhD candidate, Christina Canavisi, who's here in the photo, also have been working on. In doing this, she applied for a grant, because that's what researchers do that are in universities. They apply for grants. And grant application said, well, tell us what's your target market, how big is your opportunity, what are the key customer requirements that you're going to meet with this technology, and she's completely unfamiliar with the terms. So she called her tech transfer officer and said, I don't understand, how do I go about taking care of this? They said, well, we had this fellow over at HTR that said he'd be glad to work with us, Mike Riedlinger. Gave her name, number, email, and we connected and off we went. We spent many afternoons together. One of the grants that we worked on happened to be for a program called the NSF I-Corps. And the National Science Foundation had a mission to find ways to help further the millions of dollars that had been invested in public funds into research throughout academic centers in the United States. They connected with a fellow named Steve Blank. And Steve is a teacher at Stanford University. He's also a serial entrepreneur. He wrote one of the books that you have that we passed out, Startup Owner's Manual, and I'll make a few more references to it. But Steve in particular is noted as being the developer of the Lean LaunchPad approach. So I thought it was just way cool that they were doing this, and gladly I spent some time at Stanford. At the time, however, I did not know that it was going to require 300 hours of my time over 12 weeks. So getting into the program meant a really intensive amount of time and effort relative to going through the program itself. It doesn't mean that we're going to do 300 hours here over the next 12 weeks. But I want to give you a flavor of what we did and what we accomplished and what you could accomplish using the same process. So, Lean LaunchPad. It's now become sort of the buzzword for getting new startups off the ground. There's some key tenets of Lean LaunchPad thinking. Like startups really aren't scaled down versions of the big company. So when you get folks that are starting to put together a market requirements document, that's sort of the first sign they came from a big company. You need to stop, hit pause. There's a different way to go about things. Founding teams have the mission to actually search for a scalable business model, and they transition over to another team that does the execute part. And execute means that you're going to put a business plan in place and a marketing plan, much more formal documents, but you only do that after you actually know what it is that you're doing inside of the business model. A lot of folks get it confused, and the tradition in teaching MBA programs and entrepreneurship has been build the execution documents first, and this is the complete opposite of that. The other key thing, failure is integral to the search for business model, meaning you're going to make a lot of assumptions in putting your business model together. Proving them wrong is actually good. It should not be considered a failure as long as you're learning. And we'll go through more of these. So in the book, there's a thing called the manifesto that's in the starts chapter 2 of the Startup Owner's Manual. I really encourage you to read through that. It's a very quick read, but that's where all the tenets of Lean LaunchPad sit. I'm going to pass along to you the things I learned from the NSF I-Corps experience. We have only a really short time together. We're not going to get anywhere close to the 300 hours, but there's some key points I learned. I'm going to pass them on to you. These are the 2 books that we use in our program. Both of them are relatively easy reads. Business Model Generation doesn't get a lot of airplay as a book in this presentation, but relative to reading and using this as a tool, I think it's one of the most innovative books I've read in well over a decade, and I love to read, by the way. So I'm glad that we could provide them, and thank you, Noreen and the folks at NYSERDA and iCLEAN for making it possible together. All right, takeaways for today. I want you to know about some of the key success factors for startups that are included in the Lean LaunchPad methodology. I want to give you a few techniques and some business model tools that you can work with immediately. And we'll go through a brief exercise towards the end on how to work with this. Really want to make it clear we're only scratching the surface. These are earliest parts of the story. Lean LaunchPad. So I worked with a group, Light Tip is what Christina and Dr. Rowland call themselves. They had a very interesting medical device that they thought they were building to help out a cancer surgeon. And the reason that this was an invention is they had that thing that looks like a nice little dangly crystal. Let's see, laser of choice. All right, so this was actually the invention is this. And they have a patent on how it's built and some of the applications for it. And this ends up being embodied into this device. And it's used for surface treatment of particular cancers. And it's done in this form factor because they designed it to treat oral cancers. So they thought it's a medical device. We want to commercialize that. We'll go into the NSF I-Corps program, and we're going to get some money so we can build and test our prototypes. Well, we really had lots to learn out of all this. When we started, the requirement was, day one, we had to bring a business model canvas with all of the 9 elements in it laid out when we arrived. So when we went to Stanford, the moment we walked through the door, we were expected to do a 3-minute presentation on how did we get here as our starting point. So this is literally what we had when we walked in the door as our best thinking. Later in that day, we were supposed to put together our estimated market size. And this almost gave Dr. Rowland a heart attack because there we were being grilled by Steve Blank and a couple of Samuel Road venture capitalists. They said, excuse me, you flew all the way over here from Rochester. The National Science Foundation has given you millions of dollars in research funding. And the best you got is a $10 million target market for a regulated medical device. So if you guys don't figure this out, because that's way too small to even trouble with here in the program, we're just going to give you an early ticket home. And they were very serious about it. So we got a 24-hour reprieve. Come back tomorrow, tell us why you should still be here, and we'll let you stay as long as you make the criteria. So by the next day, we did find a bigger market, and we put together another canvas. And let's see what did, did it go the wrong way here? So here's what we did. Canada, all right. So clever us, we put in UV curing. Okay. So not medical device, UV curing. Did we really know what the market opportunity? No. But the criteria was you at least did something to find another application for the technology. You're making some progress, so they let us stay for the next couple of days. But as I will tell you, I'm sure that we're on the watch list because we did get a little extra scrutiny. So from there, we continued on. We learned about how to interview customers. And let's see, we'll go back that slide. So we had to interview people while we were there at Stanford. So we interviewed a couple of oral surgeons. The first surgeon we interviewed very nearly kicked us out of his office. Turns out he was one of the top 50 surgeons in the country. He actually ran that particular practice area for Stanford Medical, which the PhD candidate was not fully aware of. When we had that first interview, it was just a wee bit embarrassing. When she tried to explain what it was she was trying to accomplish there, he basically completely shut her down, went through the top folks that had done photodynamic therapy for oral cancer treatments in the country that he personally knew, and why it was not at all acceptable. What was she doing that was any different? So after palpable silence, we got back to, well, look, we're just exploring opportunities. We're here because you're the top in the world at what you're doing. If it's really not applicable, we'll move on, which we did. So, let's see. We interviewed a few more doctors, and we were also told by our NSF mentors, you really need to kick this medical device thing, because you have probably much bigger opportunity, but you're holding onto this so tightly that you're not exploring other things. So you need to give it up, find some other things, and of course we did. So we went right ahead, we interviewed a few more doctors. The embarrassing thing was, well, by golly, these gadgets are already out there. The folks that do photodynamic therapy already have quite a collection of instruments that they use, including one that looks a lot like what they were building. And they also showed us this. So inside this canister is liquid nitrogen. So it turns out that for an overwhelming majority of the cancers that were the type and dimension that this device otherwise might cure that they were building, this is the quickest, easiest, best solution for most dermatologists to use, which we had no idea of. But the benefit was now we knew it, and now we could start kicking the medical device habit, even though we'd already been told do something else. We went to trade shows because we had some of that funding from our NSF grant that allowed us to travel. Trade shows were great. I really thought that both Christine and Dr. Rowland had been to trade shows, but they had not been to any industry-led trade shows. So they've been to academic conferences, things like this. Completely different experience to be at a manufacturing-oriented show. This is actually a look of disgust right here from Dr. Rowland. She was looking at a $35,000 microscope that uses absolutely terrible illumination optics. But she knew it because this is what she does. All right, so she was absolutely just appalled. How could these things be? And we did more looking around, and one or two vendors that were there, this one happened to be Leica, had these really unusual looking devices, and they had lots of specialty illumination optics. But these were only a few of the many people that were there at this particular trade show that were doing this. And as soon as she saw this, she said, oh, somebody in the industry actually has an appreciation for illumination optics. This is exactly what we do. So as soon as we got onto that, we started drilling down what else is out there now using that as a search term. So we could go to Google, we could do other things around illumination optics. We got out of the medical industry altogether, and we found a whole other thing, which came from, this is from RPI, right? Some folks here from RPI? Thank you. All right. So a wonderful lighting institute. And by golly, so here's bad lighting, here's good lighting, and the whole difference is the illumination optics. Oh, isn't that just amazing, right? What kind of opportunity might that be, and how could we find out more, right? So we decided, well, now is the time to do a thing called a pivot. So we abandoned the photodynamic therapy approach. Well, we didn't abandon it, we set it aside. Decided there must be a lot of other customer segments that we can now look at. What are those? What is the opportunity? What must we do now? Right? So we did a thing called a pivot. And a pivot is when a fundamental element of a business model changes. So it's not an incremental change. It's not a discovery, oh, we need to sell it for $4 instead of $3. That would be a fairly small change. It's no, our customer base is altogether wrong. They're not doctors. They're architects, or they're lighting designers, or they're electricians. It's a whole different thing. So it causes a dramatic change in the model. Steve Blank says, no business plan survives first contact with customers, so we were getting that first contact early. And the benefit to us is the program gave us the tools we needed to actually get out in the field and talk to people in a structured way. And that's what we'll talk about later in the workshop part of this. So, Owner's Manual, page 35, and you'll see it throughout the book. Well, once we had that, we started doing the searches. We now knew illumination optics is where we're going to go. So we could actually now find market size information. And I have to tell you, this is like surprisingly easy to find. We were in a panic. We were trying to figure out how do we go from $10 million to something that keeps us here another day. But once we knew illumination optics was the field, there was lots of research information that was easily available. We found several market reports and one that was very good, great numbers. And we found, well, it's 50 billion worldwide between both lighting and medical optical systems alone. Well, inside of that, this is the worldwide number. Well, we're not going to be able to address all the world, but the European and North and South American markets, that we can address. So our served market is going to be smaller, but still worked out to 15 billion. And we did have the numbers inside of this research report, which was free, by the way. It was huge. It was like 175 pages, but it was there, it was free. And then we figured our target market is going to be a lot smaller, but it's still a $500 million. It's 500 million. And we got there because there's only a subset of those that are going to use custom optics. A lot of them like to use off-the-shelf materials. We're not going to be able to fight that. All right. So the ones that are like Leica that we encountered at the trade show are a subset of a much bigger market. That's how we got there. And this was a winner, so they loved this. Oh, you must be on the right track. So we went back, redid the canvas, and you see lots of things started to change. So customer segments altogether changed. We still kept medical device folks, but now they're OEMs. They're not physicians anymore. We added the optical system firms that didn't have their own advanced design capability. We changed our value proposition, so now rapid design and prototyping became the key. That's what we do and how we deliver value to that market, and it means we also need to focus on a reduced time to market and lowering design risk for these folks. Those are where we bring value now. So once that was done, we moved on and things became much more clear. We could go through who are our partners, how do we build the revenue stream for this, what things must we do so that we capture value as well in our business. So all these things started to shift, and away we went. So there's next canvas. We decided we needed to redo things altogether. We could now design a thing called a customer archetype. So we could literally paint a picture. Who is our ideal customer? Literally, what do they look like? And these were people. Another part of what we did is we actually photographed the people that we interviewed. Because key to the process was face-to-face interviews with people. 10 to 15 a week was the minimum requirement. So once we did that, we started finding these folks. Well, it's a chief technology officer for an LED lighting company. But we could tell them what we do. They would know exactly what it is. They'd see the value very quickly. And as we did this, the problem became we actually had projects offered to us on the spot. So another thing that we'll go through is we were told, no, whatever you do, this is not a sales presentation. You're just there to collect information. Whatever you do, you cannot sell anything. And it was really, really hard. And a couple of these guys, well, these guys in particular, really and truly sent over requests for quotations. One of them sent a purchase order for a project, right? Which we said, sorry, we can't do it. We just cannot do it. But it said we found exactly the right folks for what we're doing. We now can build a business model around it. We learned their customer workflow, so we knew what our customers did. We knew where we fit in the process, and we had an understanding of how long is it end-to-end, what other things are required. We can now put together a revenue model. How does the payment flow? Where is it we get our money out of the whole program? And we're off and running. And this was pretty exciting times. There were a lot of competitors that we found, and this is one area that I'd say is very important inside of Lean LaunchPad, is it makes you incorporate your customers up front, because it's key to both the customer and the value proposition, which you need to solve for. You can only do that if you understand what the competitive scheme is. So we address different sets of folks, and you see here's the off-the-shelf folks, right? part of the market just to them. But we have a good understanding, what is it that they're providing relative to their service at what price points. And we know that there's other folks that are out there that are specialty optics integrators. They could be customers, they could be competitors, all depends. But this was an integral part of the process.
Mike?
Yes?
Were you led to some of this by those early customers that you were forced to bump up against?
Right.
Did they send you, they tell
Well,
what about?
it would often come up in conversations, and this is the other key to interviewing, is we learned how to listen to what the customers were saying. And the important thing is to be relatively quiet. And folks will tell you all kinds of things, because they'll start saying, well, you know, we were working with these products that came from Lumex, came up several times, and especially medical devices, right? So how do you differ from this product that Lumex is? And they tell us exactly what it was, what wavelengths it like, what the application, and we could look them up, and now we could tell them, well, you know, here's what's different about what we do. Great, right? Or the other one, Frame came up because Frame, Italian manufacturer of lighting optics, right? Well, we're using these off-the-shelf components from Frame, but we're still having this problem with, right? Off they go, or thank you. Right? So lots of notes. But yes, that is, they came from the interviews we did. All right. Now she got me off track. Oh, so in the course of 12 weeks, we interviewed 106 people, and these were almost all face-to-face contacts. And they usually had to be a minimum of 15 minutes. Most of the conversations were closer to an hour in time, so that's where the bulk of the time went. We started out with this as a $10 million opportunity, but in the whole process, we discovered a $500 million opportunity that's in illumination optics. And now that you see what they look like, you probably notice them like all over the place, and I can't help but see them like everywhere now. Right? Now the key to Dr. Rowland is she can tell you what is it that's suboptimal about all of them, and how much work is it going to take to do something better. And she can very quickly tell you, is it really worth doing anything different than off the shelf? And that's where the value of her expertise came from. All right. Final canvas. So here we go, and there's where those LED fixtures went. So we did keep the medical device, but they're now medical device developers, and we know that it's firms that lack that advanced illumination optical design. So wherever we can spot that, and we can identify a person that might be a chief technical officer, we know that that's where we can make our first connect and have a conversation around business that we want. All right? Other thing that was required when we did our final presentation was to sort of do the high speed through the business model canvases. So I'll do the same for you, and you can see the change over time, because we did make changes almost every week. So these do go pretty quick. Here's the one we started with, and you can just see the changes now as we go. So in working through the business model, and you can start with that blank sheet of paper that you've got. There's some questions on it. We'll do this in just a few more minutes. But the whole idea is that you mark it up, you save the information, and that's why things were X'd out until we got to a point where so many things changed, we started a new canvas altogether. Because you want to retain all the learning that you've had in the process before and be able to continually build upon it. That's the approach to be used. Well, when we're done with this, what we completed was a search for business models. So we now knew exactly how we were going to make revenues, we knew where the value was, we knew where customers were, we knew who we needed as partners. But what we need to put in place now to move on as a business is to put the execution plan in place. So an execution plan means a business plan, and actually setting up a legal entity now that's going to conduct business. So that's the next step for the folks in White-Tip, and they are working with HTR to do that. But this is where the plan now is going to follow this upfront process. And it's a big difference, because many businesses start with a plan, and they put a lot of time and effort into putting a plan together, but with very little customer contact. So big difference in the model. All right. So now we'll move on. What you can apply in your business. So you heard my story. Any questions at this point?
Just in general, were a lot of your cohorts went through a similar iteration of the canvas, Mike, to the same degree your team did? Was that pretty typical of your cohort?
There was were some that almost completely abandoned everything they were doing. There were others that really stuck to their guns right to the very end. So, but most of them, there was some kind of a major shift that occurred. So that seemed to be pretty standard today. Yes?
You really lucked out. You found a very big market with a direct customer, right, that you easily can interface with, and you have a specific product that meets that customer's need. We're having, going back and forth with our business model, and I think like our business model is closer to the medical model that you originally had. It was a very big market, but we have to interface with, multiple companies, some small, some multinational. And our issue is not so much the market or the plan. Our issue is everyone wants strategic edge. And so how can you get what you need done with your partners, without giving up the house? And so
Right.
I know when through this process with other companies, if you can comment on that and how you can work those issues.
Right. Well, and we can discuss more later afterwards. I'd love to know more about what you're working on. One of the elements inside of this is partners, and I think that's where you're going with your concern. Inside of Lean LaunchPad, the sort of teaching is partners when you're just starting out, it's sort of an illusion. Because if it's a bigger company, there may be opportunities there, but you're still a real little opportunity to them. So you need to grow your own business, and you need to be very mindful of what is it that really adds value to your partner. So you start seeing the partner as a customer. What is it that adds value to them? You incorporate them in a value proposition. Now, what things must you now pay attention to? How does it affect your business? That's how Lean LaunchPad would take care of it at the customer discovery end of the spectrum. So there's so much more to this, though. That's why I'm saying we're just going to scratch the surface. But there is a section on partnering that you'll find, particularly in the business model generation book, that could be very helpful. Other questions? Yeah?
The 106 people that you interviewed, were they all potential customers, or were some of them potential partners, or
No,
some of them competitors?
as we moved through the 9 elements of the business model canvas, we started with customers because value proposition is where this all starts, and that's actually where we go in about 2 slides, is into value proposition. Customers are right at the very core of that. So that's where we started, was with customer interviews. But as we went through the canvas, we had to interview people that were in each of those 9 boxes. So we interviewed potential vendors, potential resource providers, key suppliers, and we identified them. For Light Tip, one of the key elements in the business model was to find those companies that primarily did injection molded plastics for optical devices. But as we dug into it, there are only a handful in the United States, literally like 5 or 10 at most, that really had the expertise to make a difference if you did really well-designed illumination optics. But we now could identify who those 5 or 10 were, and we had discussions with a few of them that said, here's what we got in mind, and how our business model works. Does that work for you? And there were 2 or 3 out of the handful we talked to that said, for that kind of thing, for that opportunity, the scale expanding to us, we could work with you on that. Right. So it said we've got a business opportunity. But the others, not so much, not so interested. So we had to talk to everybody that's in that canvas. Yeah?
You mentioned some of the people in your cohort ended up at a completely different place than where they started, almost unrecognizable.
Right.
From where they came in. Can you describe the outcome of some of that? I mean, was it as if would they've been in the same position had they just not having had any plan and gone in and had 100 interviews with somebody in a particular industry to learn a whole lot?
The folks that had the biggest changes were the ones that had really not talked to anyone other than their own group. So they were inside of a university, inside of an academic area, deep into the research. They had dreamed up their own business. Hey, what if we could take this MRI machine out and we scan people as they look at ads? That was one of the groups that went through this, right? So they wanted to put people into an MRI, show them an ad, what happens in the brain, right? How are they responding to this? They thought that there was a business inside of this. Really, they they actually went out and they started talking to people that they got the blank stares. What are you talking about? Like, you know, why would we put people under an MRI to look at CAD concepts? I don't get it. Right? So those things happen. Customer contact is key. All right, we'll move on. Hopefully there'll be a lot more questions after we get into this. This is a customer development process, and this is really what that book you've got is about. There's two key elements, the search and the execution. So search is what we went through in that NSF program. It's not about selling what you have, though, to a customer. So this is really hard for me because I spent many years selling things. So I just go into automatic sales mode. I was admonished many times by the NSF mentors until finally I got it. You've got to avoid the selling mode. You're there to collect information. If you sell, you're actually going to do yourself a lot of harm. So an important learning that I do want to pass along. In the process itself, we'll go into this customer discovery loop. So this is designed so that it's a feedback loop, and you can keep going through this again and again, and that's where we went. So in particular, when we were told no more medical devices, you need to stop doing this altogether. And we did have a Skype conversation with Steve Blank, where he told us you're wasting your time and the NSF's money because you're holding so tight to this medical device. You know, you really have to let go of it if you're going to benefit from this program. So things went rudderless for about 2 weeks, and we talked to everybody. We talked to jewelers, we talked to photographers, we talked to folks in the Defense Department, we talked to laser manufacturers. We went all over the place. And it was after searching maybe 3 or 4 dozen different types of things altogether that the illumination optics came up, and it's because we went to the trade show. All right. So out of the 4 phases here, so number 1 was to state the hypothesis. So business model canvas, you can literally start by filling out what you know today or what your beliefs are today on the canvas that you have. You test each of these as though they're a problem. So the key is to build a testable hypothesis around the things that you're putting down on the canvas. So it's just like you're putting together a science experiment. And this is where the big advantage was for the scientists that were in the room. Testable hypothesis, it worked, right? I know how to build one of those and what to do. All right, so everybody here, testable hypothesis? We know how to do that. All right. Well, we'll get there. Then you test a solution. So the first thing you want to do is to understand the problem. So you put together a problem statement. You go and you interview customers. Is this the problem you're really having? I've observed you doing these things. Seems to me like it's a problem. Is it really a problem to you? All right. You build a solution. So what is it that you're doing? I know folks here are primarily doing different types of energy devices. Some I think are in generation, some are in energy saving. Right? Anybody in biofuels? No? All right. All right. And then you verify, is there actually a market opportunity here or not? And if the answer is or not, nobody's getting it from what I'm saying. That, you know, I talked to the wrong people. Well, they were the people that you chose to talk to. So you've got to disconnect. You've got to solve for it. So you go back through the loop again. If you need to, you make a really big change. Maybe you're talking to the wrong customers altogether. You've made a mistaken hypothesis about who your customers are. Maybe there's something in the product that you're offering, the way you're positioning your solution, but you need to make a change to make it work. All right. And there it is, kind of laid out, because some folks, they like all those steps and how linear it gets to be. This also is in that wonderful book that you have. And each one of these, there's several pages of text. It's in the Startup Owner's Manual to explain what it is, why you do it, and questions that you can use in going through the process. All right? More detail than I like to get into, right? Are we all still awake? Are we doing okay? Okay, all right. Just checking. Customer validation. So this is the next step, but I often see that this is where a lot of the startups that I see at HTR, when they come in, they're already here, they wanna start selling, right? So they're getting ready to sell in phase one of this particular chart, right? So they're coming in, who do you know that's a good salesman? If I get a couple of good customer contacts going, I can get some more investors, right? All I need is a few letters of support for my grant, right? And I'll get my SBIR, right? That's really what I wanna do, right? But they're a step ahead, and that's the challenge here. So once you get to customer validation, you do a whole nother process that's getting ready to sell. You once again get out of the building, you do particular things that are also outlined in those books. It helps you develop a positioning statement. So folks that go to an ad agency, right, they're gonna help me out with my positioning statement, and away they go. But if you go through the process, it almost drops right out of it into your lap. You know exactly what to say. It's just like illumination optics now for us if we go to CTO of an LED optics company or a light company. So by the way, they want to do things for heat is a big deal because they're pumping more power into the LEDs to get brighter light out of it. And now that they have problems because of the heat they need to dissipate, right? So they think they've got a heat problem. If you show them, well, you know, you're actually losing 50% of the light that you're throwing off your chip to start with, right? So you could actually back off on the power. You've already solved the heat problem. You just need optics. And it's like, oh, whole different game. Anybody here in LED? Thank you. All right. So you familiar with that?
Yeah.
There. So now we know exactly what it is we need to say. So our selling is so much easier. It's already scripted. We can now actually hire a salesperson. We could tell them, here's the person you call on. We know who they are because you're going to buy a list that has those folks on it. Here's what you tell them. Here's the price. Here's the service. And away we go. But we're not there yet. So if you're already at a point where you're doing your sales thing or you think you need to find a salesman, you need to take a hard look. Have you done everything you need to do relative to the upfront customer discovery? Okay. All right. Business model canvas. So you set notations in each of those 9 boxes, but right now we're going to start the value propositions, which is right in the the very center. And I apologize because when they're tiny like this, the words are awfully small. We'll start with value propositions and the customer segments because those are fundamental. In between the two of them, we get the product market match. So product market match is absolutely fundamental. If you don't have that, there's absolutely no sense in proceeding with anything else. Because raising more money really won't help you out at all. Getting a salesperson on board, it actually does more damage very quickly. You've got to find the product market match. That's what we're going to do. Start with some of the value propositions because it gives rise to who are the right customers now. So when you think this through, who do you think you're selling to, right? And your technology will probably be the first thing that comes to mind, but it needs to be a product. So what is it that delivers value now to that customer you've got in mind? Do they have a particular pain that you're solving with your technology, and how does that work? What's the gain in it for them? Do they really care, and how deeply do they care? So if it's just a nice to have kind of thing, like another laser would be to a dermatologist that we found, it's not going to be a good business. It just won't work. And why your solution, not somebody else's that's already out there? There's different ways to look at the value proposition because I'm just guessing that most of you are technology-oriented folks. In other words, you've had a technical discovery that's given rise to an idea for a new business. You're probably going to be in the technical insight scope here. So you're building things that are faster, smaller, more efficient. Maybe some are simpler and lower cost. There's others that are market insight driven. So distribution, bundling, branding, those things end up making a difference. But I don't get that there's a lot of marketing folks here, right? We're technical folks? Okay. So if you look at when you put your propositions together, faster, cheaper, better, that ends up being the mantra. But there are other approaches to value that customers can see. All right. Now, if you have only one thing that you're going to remember, one slide that you'd ever copy from this deck, please make it this one. If you do this and you actually fill in the blanks, you can beat out 90% of the folks that enter a business plan competition. Right? But the key is you really have to not be kidding yourself So for a target customer, and you put the name, who is it, their title, as specific as possible, who wants or needs, your compelling reason to buy. And this is you need to do it from the customer's perspective. What makes a difference for them to part with dollars for this? Exactly what is that? Put the name of what your product is in there. You need to have its category. Is it a energy generating something, a battery, whatever, that provides a particular benefit, and you name what is it. But this is how the customer perceives the benefit, not you. So what benefit do they get? And you also name a competitive product, because this gives them a way to anchor. What is it? How do I judge what you're doing versus a competitor? So this is the key slide. I've been in several of my own businesses where it's been months of work to do this. But this is the template. Had I had this before I went to Stanford, it would have made life so much easier. So this, I really hope, is the key takeaway. All right. Any questions around this? Or? No? All right. All right. So more questions you can go into. Again, these are outlined in the book too. So exactly what is the problem? And I've talked to lots of folks that don't quite even know the problem that they're trying to solve. It's really important. Exactly who is it relevant to? And it sounds like that should be so easy. It really ends up being very difficult. Most all the entrepreneurs I've talked to, it's a head fake for who they think their first customer really is. And they usually need to go different parts of the chain to figure out who is actually going to park the cash, who makes the purchase decision. It's often not the end user of the products. And on we go. And Doreen, we're going to make these slides available to folks so that, yes? And you're going to tell them how? Oh, okay. All right.
Figure that out afterwards.
All right. So one of the approaches that I take when I do workshops, so I use this in the pre-seed workshop that I teach in Rochester. I have people break this down in their breakout groups. So it's something we could do here if you want to have one-on-one discussions. After we're done with this part of the session, I'd be glad to do that. Small group, so I'll offer for the folks that are here, if you want to and you're so motivated, send me an email. I'd be glad to help you out with any of this. So the key is break it down. So identify the particular pain. That's really the highest level element that we're going to work with. You want to be able to be very specific about the customer that has that pain. So, of course, pain, I was thinking my teeth because I've had these toothaches. So here's this fellow that's got this really bad toothache, almost like David's got right now, but not quite. So I'm just imagining, he's had long-term loss because he looks like he's 30-something. So, and he's probably concerned about his own personal appearance because I think he's got a nice shirt, maybe even cufflinks. So, concerned about his personal appearance. He looks relatively lean. He probably goes to a health club. So now I can build all kinds of parameters so I can identify more of these folks. I can figure out how many of them are there and how might I reach them. So this is real helpful to me in building that target market that I want to appeal to. And for us, we had that customer archetype. So we now know it's a CTO of an LED lighting company. And we know more about them. Like that they're probably an electrical engineer. They haven't had a background in optics. So they're trying to use something off the shelf that's just going to work as best they know. Right? And now we can spot these folks anywhere in the world, for that matter. And we'll know exactly how many there are. Customer types. So inside of this, there are different types of markets. Consumer markets, there are a lot of folks that get input from others when they buy. Is this something they use all by themselves? Do they use it with other folks? You know, is it sporting goods? Is it something else that requires more than one decision maker? And inside of the business-to-business markets, there's usually lots of folks that are involved in a purchase decision, whether you're aware of it or not. One of the findings here for us, or discovery in the program, you actually need to build a value proposition that solves the issues for all of these folks. My least favorite is the saboteur, because you never know who they really are. But a saboteur is bad to encounter to start with, because they're going to block the door altogether. They're going to misdirect you. Difficult to deal with. A lot of folks want to get to the economic buyer or the executive decision maker too early in the process, and they don't know that this person immediately turns around, they're going to ask other recommenders and influencers, what's their opinion about this particular new device? So you need to know who these folks are, and you need to have a strategy for working with them up front. All right. Day in the life. So some might call this a use case. It's a real pain in the ass to make because it usually means you got to write some detail and you're going to get them wrong several times. But this is how you develop needs. So need discovery comes about by observing customers, and you literally need to be able to write down what does a day in the life of my average customer look like and what we need to do. Then you can build those options. What is it that's going to relieve pain that I now see? Or how can I now express what I see as pain so I can test it, right? So here's a problem that I observe in the way that you're going about doing the work, right? Is this really truly a challenge that you're aware of or not? And maybe a latent need that they have. And once you tell them, a whole different game. Because I never knew that I needed an iPhone, right? As an example. All right. And how intense is the need? Because I've also met with lots of folks where it's a nice to have, it's not a big deal. So this goes back to that compelling reason. These are all ways that you can get to that answer. What is the compelling need that I'm going to solve? More compelling a need, almost too obvious, sorry about that. We're back to teeth again. So here's an example, a value proposition statement that's built around this. Save your teeth, sounds like it came from the University of Rochester, Eastman Dental School, probably. So they're making something now that provides middle-aged men and women with the most effective long-term solution to tooth surface erosion and decay preventing acute toothaches. And their solution is, after all of this, and they explain how this goes about happening over time, to remineralize the tooth. It's a good start. That's really all it is. There's some folks, they stop here, but this is a start. All right, who's falling asleep already? All right, okay, thank you. This is some of the artwork from Steve Blank. There's a few of these marker arts that we had in our program, and it was kind of Steve to lend it to me. So the big deal is get out of the building. You need to actually be interacting and talking to folks. We go back to the hypothesis. So you need to build a testable hypothesis, design an experiment around it, put it to the test using other people. So you need to get out of your laboratory or office and meet with customers, potential partners, investors that have resources that you might need, vendors that you're going to need to work with, how they work. And what you want to get to is an insight. So the insight is a little bit fluffier. It's more difficult to describe, but it's those things that you now have an awakening. So there's another book that Steve Blank had written, 4 Steps to the Epiphany, that sort of makes sense. So you're looking for an epiphany. Well, the other side of it is he had a company called Epiphany Software that he sold for $2 billion. So that's the process he used to get that. That's his story. But you really are looking for insights, and that's what he had in building that company up and getting to that point. So the interviews really are for you to listen to the customers, turn off the selling mode altogether, understand what are the issues that they face, what do they see as being very important. And you really want to put your assumptions to the test. You need to realize the things that you think about your business, all those ideas that you had in your business plan, they're just assumptions. They need to be tested. There'll be a few of them they'll pass through, but it's usually very few. Most are going to change on the way. So in doing this, it really is very helpful that you write down yourself what is the test going to be. What are the outcomes that you're going to say it passes or it fails? And you need to run through this several times. But in our process, every week we need to put together a template. Here's what we're going to test this week. Here are the specific things we're going to do. And here's our pass-fail criteria for meeting them. So every week we went through this, we had 10 minutes. We had to describe what we were doing, what we've learned for what we're putting to the test next. All right. Asking the right questions, it's really conduct the interviews. It seems so easy that we're going to make this a student research project. We're going to hire an intern that's going to do this. We're going to get a contractor, maybe a telemarketing firm. You can't do that. The founders need to go out there and get the first-hand experience. It's daunting. Emotionally, it was really hard for the first 20 or 30 of these calls for the researchers I was working with. And if I go back to my early days when I was in sales, it was really hard for me too. But it's the kind of thing that you get over once you get those questions that you want to have answered down. You know what it is you're looking for, and you can articulate, here's why I'm talking to you today. And we'll get into that in just a moment. So here's some tips. What you can do. So literally the moment you leave this room, you could start putting your list together of 50 people that you might talk to. It could be that you have a few in your mind, and maybe you've never talked to them for whatever reason. But you can also get leads from others, other founders that you're working with, investors, trade magazines. You really want to look for those folks that might fit into the assumed customer profile, but you're really looking for folks that are open to talking to you anyway. And that was the key at the front end. So if you just get into the mold, how do I talk to folks? How do I put forth my assumptions that I want to put to the test? And see how it goes, you'll get some comfort with it, and you'll get some experience. Larry.
Mike, what I'm struggling with is that certainly you've been through starting a company, you realize that everything changes and pivot is pretty standard, but the idea of not selling it all is what's challenging. So as an example, we're in the middle of a pivot right now and talking to customers, but a lot of times this takes months or years and to survive through that, because I'm still, I guess, I don't quite understand why you wouldn't sell if the customer wants to, even do an interim project as an example that ties into what your ultimate project your plan is. What's the
Right.
what's the big issue with not selling at that stage?
Right. So here's the learning for us, because not selling was really hard for me as well. But it turns out, in my case, the two researchers, they weren't prepared to sell anything anyway. They, had no idea how much time it would take or what they'd do. So that helped, because practically they just did not have the resources available to do the work anyway. The way I went about it was, if you're doing these interviews, you really find out what is it that I get a lot of. So it's way too easy to get the first order, so to speak, to literally sell something, and now you're committed. You have to deliver. You have to do the things that you now said you would do to deliver. It could be it's only a one-off that you got. That might be it. You don't know yet. And that's where the value in continuing on, doing more of this. So the key was make a note. Who is it that's really interested? Because when we had that first encounter with the LED light designer, I really didn't think he was going to let us leave his office until we signed up to do a deal. I really, truly did. But we said, we can't even sell you. We committed to not sell anything. We can come back to you in a few weeks if this works out, if this is an okay business for us, and we understand what we're doing, and we can give you value, then we'll be back and we can do business. But today, we're not going to. We need to move on and talk to a few other folks.
So it's really not making a commitment too early in the process that might take your resources away from really honing and refining the
Right.
ultimate thesis of project.
Right. And to put it in the context, the reason they got on the medical device to begin with is it was a casual encounter with a physician that said, I'm doing work in light therapy. If I had a device that would be helpful for oral cancer, because the oral cavity is a very constrained area. I need a small device. I need to focus, but it has to be a measurable amount of light. He had lots of criteria. So he had the market requirements document. They put together 2 years' worth of research. So they devoted 2 years of their life. They got funding, right, to do this from grants and other work they were doing. So it was a business, so to speak. They were funded. But when they were done, they had the one guy that was interested in maybe doing a research project, and there was no other market for it, right? And this is the hazard. I've been there with other businesses I've been in. You get too caught up in the first customer because now it's cash flow, and I need that in my business. I've got payroll to meet, I've got RG needs, their bill paid, and right, off we go. Right? So it ends up being the siren song, but that's where a lot of folks get off track. So the goal here is to put this process up front, do it quickly enough that you're done inside of a few weeks of process, and we need to talk to the next 50 or 100 people, we can do that in 2 weeks' time, because we now know how to do it. So that's what I'm trying to relay here. But I understand what you're saying, because the pressures of having a business already up and running, they're immense. And you want to take the first dollar in. But the hazard is you may be missing a much bigger opportunity. That's exactly what would have happened to us had we gone down the path, raise money, do this medical device to address a $10 million market. We would never have even thought, right? It might be much easier or simpler for us to do projects inside this $500 million a year market. Yes.
So 2 questions. What benefits did you find from, I always prefer face-to-face,
Right.
but you always can't do that.
Right.
Especially if, say, your customers are overseas. You can talk a little bit face-to-face versus,
Right.
voice call or video conference
Right.
call. And the second thing, I assume because you talked to so many customers, you didn't, get NDAs in place and everything. And we've been the same thing. As soon as I talk to a CTO, and we'd be all right, first couple of meetings don't need an NDA in place, but immediately they get to the nitty-gritty because they're technicians, and they get really to, your secret sauce.
Right.
And how did you deal with that when that came up, and I think you can, kind of be
Right.
deal with that in the right way or the wrong way.
So you had a couple of different parts. One is interviews. So face-to-face is really, that is the most desirable because you get lots of other parts of communication from body language and other things that you can observe in the meeting. So as an example, we went into the oral surgeon's office to start with. I pointed out what kind of magazines are on his desk, because that's what he reads and that's how he gets information. What were the things that he had in his office? What was important to happen in his day? He had a secretary that was immediately outside with a big calendar down to the 10-minute interval, right? So now I had some metrics. How does he control his day, right? So all these things become important that you get if you're there in person, that you miss if you do a telephone call or email, you lose lots, right? Next best is Skype, and we did do some Skype calls. Same reason, folks that are in other parts of the country, other parts in the world. We did interview some folks that were in France and Italy. Skype was what we did. It was just what we had access to. It's next best, though. Right, so on we go. Email. Email is great for setting up a meeting. They're absolutely terrible for collecting it. Right, and I would say I myself fell victim to that early in my days of entrepreneurship. I thought that was the way to make contact and get information. It's terrible. So now you had another. There was another element.
Yeah,
Thank you.
NDAs
NDA,
and
secret
how
sauce and all
people
this.
dig into
So-
the details right off the
Right,
bat because of
right.
curiosity.
And it goes 2 ways, because there were some folks in the defense industry that we talked to about this as well, and they didn't want to say too much about things they're working on.
Right.
But we did find plenty of ground where we could talk around what things are important to you when you look at this type of technology, and that was perfectly fine. We could talk about it, they could talk about it, and it was enough for us. And we could ask, how do you do business with companies that are providing X, Y, and Z? And we don't have to say that we're doing any of those. And we don't have to go into any detail that's going to infringe on the patent. Right? And we got lots of rich information back. And a few of them did say, if you can do things like this, we have these other projects that we might be able to talk to you about if you were to sign an NDA. Which we said, back to Larry's thing, we're just here to collect information, right? If there is maybe a business opportunity, we'll be back and we can do that. But we're just collecting information. Right? It's going to be a challenge because I think a lot of you are already in the business, right? So you've got the pressure, how do I make payroll, pay my bills, right, return to my investors.
Yeah, I think the answer to the question really is you're not selling anything, so you don't have to lay all your cards out on the table to begin with. It's a fact-finding call. So if you sort your questions out based all around what you're trying, your technology or whatever it is you're trying to sell, then you can get away without NDAs, at least to some extent.
Right, that's right.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying, there was a couple of cases where the CTO was very technically savvy, very broad-based, very good. He immediately got to the issues and the technology around it, and he wanted to dig down in the details and, how to politely say that I'm not willing to discuss that without
Yeah, right.
turning them off.
There's a fine line, but I guess my point is you're still outside of that realm.
Right.
Your question is in the realm of, I was trying to sell him this technology, and I didn't want to tell him enough for him to make a decision without an NDA. But that's not the purpose of what you're supposed to be doing here. What you're supposed to be doing here is be working all around the technology, you know, to address questions that maybe relate to end use or,
Right.
you know, other aspects of it without giving away your hand.
Right. And I was gonna ask, is that your CTO that was there that was doing that, or was it their?
No, there's CTO.
Alright.
Like, for
Because
instance,
sometimes-
with the company you're making, light, the front end light fixtures.
Right.
And, they're immediately curious and start asking questions, I know this design, how does your, like you said, how does your design differ from everyone else's design?
Mhm.
And
Right.
did you come across where it was a little bit uncomfortable right after that first meeting, because they really were digging?
There were only a couple of times when we got into that much detail, but otherwise we had no problem avoiding it. So, but I do understand, because if you're taking a technical person, if that's the content, I mean, if that's really the product that you're delivering is your expertise, technical expertise. How do you walk the line that says, this we can do because it's not exposing any of the trade secrets or anything proprietary.
Right, and he's really
getting
doing
to the point that it's enough value now that you're conveying, so that you get a customer.
Yeah, you can tell the CTO is doing really two things.
Right.
One, he's trying to see if your technology is viable, and two, he's trying to see if you're really a technical expert and not blowing smoke
Right,
up, right?
So we'll get to another point called the minimum viable product, right? Because that's really where we're going. So what
Right.
is it that you would say meets that minimum criteria? You get the feedback, but it's not so much you're giving everything away.
Right.
Right. So we'll get there in just a minute or two. One more question, Dave?
It seems not only do your admonishment and Steve Blank's admonishment, not only do you not sell, but where, with this great listening skill, where does the filtration come in? Because on 106 people, you must have gotten relatively conflicting input.
Oh, no
And at
question.
some point, you have to filter it, right?
Absolutely.
But you try not to.
Absolutely.
Can
Thank
you
you
tell us
for-
a little bit about how you did that?
Thank you for that question, because this is a very important point. In going through this process, the key is to get your vision as an inventor. So you want to be able to capture that and hold on to it in this process. You will hear things that are completely contrary. To the extent that you can record it and understand what it is, that's fine, but you have the ultimate veto. You can say, this is completely outside of what I really had in mind, right? I've got a pretty good vision for cause, and it's perfectly fine to exclude those. But there will be a point. I mean, if everybody's telling you, what, are you nuts? Right? I mean, there's something, you're probably missing something in the explanation.
Well, I was worried, how do you avoid the selective listening, right? I come back to the ranch after 2 weeks and I only record those that I wanted to hear, not the people that
That is
dumped on
far
my
and away the
idea.
biggest issue.
Okay.
Yeah. And you need to put yourself on alert, because you're really gonna do yourself harm. Right? So the extent you can take another set of ears that has a different perspective, and we did, there are usually 2 or 3 of us, and we would share notes after our meetings, right? What did you hear? It was surprising, the differences that we had in some cases. Right? But by the end of it, I mean, by the time we're done, the 105th person we talked to, right, we were pretty much in agreement what was being said, how important it was to us, what value did it contribute. But yes, that's a huge challenge up front. Yeah.
How did you characterize your meeting when you were trying to get the meeting in the books, right?
Right.
Because basically you're going there to suck information out, which isn't very appealing.
I'm so glad you asked. So let's see if I got that in the next slide here. So let's see. So here's the way to go about it. So introductory email, right? So emails are fine for getting things set up. So as an example, the surgeon that was in Stanford, because we started in Rochester, and we were told when you're out here at Palo Alto, plan on making 10 sales calls, or 10, pardon me, see how I conditioned it?
Slipped right into
You
it.
need to make 10 interviews while you're out here within 2 days, right? So we're doing lots of emails, and we didn't have that many people that we knew on the West Coast, right? So we were going through Google searches and anything that we could do to find a connection. So Stanford was one of the points of connection, which is why we got this guy that was the oral surgeon at Stanford. We're coming there, we're doing this class. Oh, fine, you're Stanford students, no problem. Right, that's actually how Katie arrived. But we had a 1-paragraph description of what we were doing. Right, we're working in this particular field of optics that we think is helpful to cancer surgeons. Right, we know that you're an expert in your field. much the whole content, and that was enough to get interest, and they would send back a list of times, so I'm available at these times. So that's how it worked. Another way to do it is a referral source. And these are helpful, but you need more of them because there's a low yield rate to them. But you can have a referral that you send, and say, David, I'm working on this new company. We're working on a device that does energy generation from tap water. We think every home is going to need one, but we know there's only a few folks that really would put a new energy device in their basement. But you're the guy that knows a few of those, I'm sure. Right, wink, wink, right? And David would say, I have some ideas that can help you out. Send me a one-paragraph description of what you're doing that I can tell somebody about. Right? So that's how the process gets going. And then if you're in the email, and I've now got Doreen doing this, right? So I'll send an email to Doreen. Doreen, with another person's name, the two of you should meet because, right? And I give a one-sentence description, right? Here's the reason you need to meet Doreen. Here's Doreen. Here's the reason you need. Off we go. So I call. I'm Mike, David's friend. I'm working on this project. I'd just like to talk to you and collect some research about what I'm working on because I think you have some helpful insights. Could you meet with me for 15 minutes? It usually works because you take the threat away, you're not selling anymore, the person doesn't have to put their defenses up. But this is the other key. As soon as you go into sales mode after you've done that, you've lost everything. But this is the process. It really does work. I've used it. It works.
With that kind of a yield, right? Your last point, Mike?
Right. So, right. But for us, it was even more important because we had to do 10 a week no matter what, and we got literally scolded if you didn't make the number. And there were teams that there was one team that got the boot. They didn't. After the third week, they talked to like 5 people. They said, "Forget it. You're just not in the program." So, right. So we had to do this to make it work. So.
Quick question. Here's some of your feedback. This group you're working with would probably rather have a root canal than to go out on these interviews.
Oh, absolutely.
So, how do you move this group? Now, I realize that you obviously were a tremendous asset. Did every group have a sales-oriented person, or how did they get them?
Thank you. And this is a real important key. For all of the groups that were in this program, a requirement was they had to have a mentor, and it had to be somebody that had successfully transferred technology out of the university that they were from, and started another business based on university technology. That was a requirement. So I was in a group that had 24 teams, so there were 24 other mentors. They had stats on us, so average age for mentor was 52 who was in the group. Average age for the PhD candidates, 28. Average age for the investigators was like 40, right? So fortunately, there's older guys were more than welcome. There's some older gals that were there too. Well, they weren't older, but there were some experienced mentor gals. But the key to this is having the advisors, having someone that is comfortable doing this, made all the difference. And we had a different session up front, an evening session just for the mentors. Here's what you need to be aware of, and it was an awakening experience for me, because I just automatically go into the sales mode. I never thought how uncomfortable it is, especially for the PhD candidate that's the entrepreneurial lead in NSF terms, how uncomfortable it was for her to even send out the emails. And it took coaching to get her to the point it really is okay. It's not offensive. You're not saying anything that's going to turn people off. People aren't angered about having these meetings. They just don't have them. They just say no, right? And it took a while just to get to that. It was by probably 20 or 30 of the interviews, everything was just fine. She was off on her own. She could set up any meetings down on her own. It was completely comfortable. But without me being there for the first several, and especially after we had that first one where I really thought the secretary was calling security when we were there. It was explaining, here's what happened, here's what you said, here's what happened to the person that we were interviewing, here's his reaction. And it happened because, and we go through a debrief. So that was invaluable. So those of you that do not have advisors to call on, you need to talk to Doreen. Doreen can get you connected. It makes a that's what you need to do to get the customer contacts and things going, you really need to do it. It'll make all the difference. Thank you, good question.
You talked about you wanting to launch in sales mode.
Yes.
How often, and in particular in the early part of it, did the technology people want to launch into
Tech mode?
Tell me
Every
about-
conversation. That's like when you talk about the CTL. I
That's
can
what
just
I'm saying.
imagine Dr. Rowland wanted to tell every detail. And Christina went into the first meeting we were in, she was talking about light scattering and all this, and it's like, oh, forget it. Those, because you're getting away from what is the customer perception of their pain, right? So complete mismatch, but that was also part of the coaching I could now get, right? You didn't connect with this guy, you didn't see the value of the cause.
And that
We were
got
talking about
better.
Yeah. And it
Okay,
changed
just like it got
things.
easier for you not to go into sales mode, it got
Much.
easier for them.
Exactly.
Okay.
But it's tough to resist. All right, let's see what else. I'll try to get through this. How are we doing on time, Doreen?
We're good.
Oh, man, all right. Reference story. Well, there we go. Starting this company here, I don't want to sell anything, right? Fortunately, we just went through this, right? In return for your time. So here's another thing that was very helpful to us. There was a point where we're talking to folks that typically are more advanced. So as we learn more, we're getting further down the path, we're talking to much higher level people. It's important to offer something in return. So everybody wants to know what's going on in the industry, right? And it's just what's in your head and what you talk to other people. So it's actually inexpensive to get, right? So in exchange for some of your time, I can tell you what I've learned and meeting with all these other people that are like you that have these problems with what they're doing. It helps immensely because it means you're not giving something in return for the time. All right. Let's see. Prepare for the interview. How do they go about their work? So these are questions to kind of help set you up. Biggest pain seems so obvious. Magic wand. So I've talked to some other folks, and I mentor. David knows I mentor some of the U of R students in the incubator that we have at Lennox Tech. And I got chastised by the magic wand. Maybe it just sounds so silly. But this is, Steve Blank calls this the IPO question. And it's because if you really listen to what is it that would happen if you give somebody that magic wand and you really solve it, that's where big companies have come from that have done an IPO. So I actually do use magic wand. If you can wave a magic wand, what would you wish for? Right? And I often put it right up front. And it makes a world of difference. The key is you really have to pay attention to what they're saying. Because it might be completely different than what you thought you were there to listen to. All right. How they learn, one of my other favorites, how they learn about new products. Because you're going to have a new product, what are you going to do to put it in front of them? One of the companies that I co-founded, we make a laboratory consumable product now. It didn't start out that way. We went through the pivot, and we panicked, much like Larry was just so what do we do when we get the first sale? We made these diagnostic kits to start with in our business. Huge market. We raised a couple $100,000 of seed stage capital. We made these lovely products that you very quickly tell a laboratory technician, does the mouse that you just did was just born, can you do a little tail snitch in your mouse and tell if it's got the genotype that you're really looking for to do your experiments or not? Because a nasty little thing, you don't want to feed the mice that don't have the genotype. You don't want them to, because it takes time and effort and you're, all right, fine. We made these lovely little kits to very quickly tell different genotypes, and we could tailor it for the different genotypes, and we very promptly found most researchers at most do 100 to 300 mice for an experiment every 2 years. Right, so we very quickly discovered after a year and a half of work, no, there isn't a market there. So we had to do our pivot. It was so very interesting. How do we learn about new products? So this became another thing later because as we went through the discovery, discovered there's a way to change the technology we're delivering so that we could make a laboratory consumable product from it. And it was a real aha moment because we went back to our notes and almost everybody we'd interviewed about the genotyping kit had that problem. Right? Well, I do this thing post-PCR, I've got to do my cleanup, I get different results all depending on my lab tech on it went, and there was all the stuff. We just never paid enough attention to it until we needed to. Next question is, so how do you learn about new products? Right? Because we figured there's a magazine everybody reads, Lab Tech News, or whatever it is, key ways they learned about it, vendor days. So downstairs, down in the atrium, most researchers, they have an atrium just like the one out here. Vendors put up little tabletop displays maybe once a quarter. And that's the only way they ever find out about a new product, is they go to vendor days. So, darn, we're going to have to go to every center. And yeah, that is what we ended up doing. And the other is, well, that's what I learned at my school. All right. So thank you to Steve Jobs for Apple IIs. But, all right. Key question at the very end. What should I have asked you about? So whenever folks we found would take us in and have these interviews, they had a particular thing that was burning in their mind. They really wanted us to ask. And maybe half the time we'd actually ask that question, but the other half we didn't. So you always want to include at the end, what is it I should have asked you? And they usually go on for half an hour about whatever it is, and that's really the thing that's the pain point. All right.
Sounds like this is longer than a 30-minute interview, though. It may turn into an hour.
It could be. But you'll quickly know, am I making a connection or not? I mean, that's what happens. And there were folks that we get there for 10 minutes, and it's like, there's absolutely nothing that's going to work here. But that's valuable information, because we'd assume that those were people we wanted to talk to. So that was big learning for us, but there wasn't a long conversation. Right? And others, where you get the long conversation, you now get details. Here's what they really care about. So, all right, customer interviews. Goal, 10 to 15 a week. So if you keep the pace up, Larry, it only takes like 3 or 4 weeks, and you get to what you need to know for the pivot. There is a point about 30 to 40 interviews in where you're really tired of the whole thing. It definitely happened with my group. We were forewarned. In the NSF program, this is what's going to happen after about 30 or 40. Everybody loses energy, you get really bogged down, folks are going to be about to quit. The reality is you've actually learned a ton. And if you just persist and you muscle through and you get to the next set, everything starts to turn around, and that is about where we hit our pivot. So, yes.
Another related question. Is there a way, did you find there's a way to sense if they are willing to put their livelihood in a startup's hands? So as an example, I've actually experienced this before where, good idea, I understand the pain, we got to find somebody bigger than a startup to go and solve this problem because our business goes away.
Right.
If you can't deliver, if you.
Right.
So,
yes, those things did come up, and that's also where the potential for who is it that would be the partner might come up, right? That might be an indicator that says, right, I can't deliver this, but Lockheed Martin could. Could I be a subcontractor then to Lockheed Martin? So now you find out who in Lockheed Martin does subcontracts for that kind of thing, and you go and you interview them, right? As an example, those kinds of things did come up. Right? All right, we'll try to move on here and get done. Another wonderful artwork from Steve. Customer development. So you're really testing all those guesses as you go through the canvas. You really want to mark it up so that you can save all the learning. You don't want to throw that out. You want to learn from it. You might need to get to a point where starting a new canvas is a practical thing. You've marked up so many things. But you really need to get out of the building, encounter other folks, be they customers, partners, vendors, folks you're going to work with. So here's an example from a program we went through, another colleague that was there. This is more of the energy-oriented one. So here's hypothesis. Power performance, concerns for sensor networks, right? So they talk to customers from different industry segments, really, that need these sensor networks, right? So the building management defense, right? But the key is power performance were the two criteria for their value proposition. Right? So what they ended up learning after they did all those interviews, and you saw the names of the companies that they interviewed, so probably 20 or 30 there. For some of them, power and performance were in fact keys, but there were some others, reliability, configuration, control, and they all played. And it all depended on who had the different sets of critical elements inside their value proposition. But otherwise, this was just their own guess inside their own room that they had put together. And it was going out and doing the interviews that they found this. But that's an example of testable hypothesis they put together and what they did. So every week NSF program, we had to do this. So who was it, what hypothesis did we put to the test? Who did we talk to? What did we learn? And we made slides just like this, and that's where these came from. Any questions? No? Prototypes. So this came up a little bit earlier, minimum viable product. It really helps to have something to show and tell. So if I was telling somebody about a new phone, it could be a little brick of wood for that matter, but you get the idea that what's the form factor, what does it look like, right? There's ideas now that come into another person's mind. It helps you communicate. So that's the idea behind a prototype. But in putting the prototype together, you want the smallest set of features that enables you to get as much feedback as possible. So you're really looking for what is it that made a difference. So was there some pain now that this person thinks they can solve because they've got one of these? It's like, oh yeah, now I can keep my calendar. And the same thing I'm making phone calls from. That's great, right? Somebody else, I can take pictures while I'm on the road. I don't have to have another device. Right? Oh, I can get maps so I know where the Institute for Nanoscale Engineering is. Right? All of these things will start to come just because you have this thing. You don't even have to have the feature, and you don't have to call up anything. It doesn't have to have a UI necessarily, right, to do those things or to get the feedback. There may be other cases, though, where you do. So you're talking about the case where it's technical information I'm inferring that you're delivering, right? Some expertise? Huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Right? So then it's what is it that you think is the least you can tell but get information back? And you need to design that in, because the catch is the more effort, in particular, you put into a physical product. So if we waited until we had a completed iPhone, operating system running, all the maps, Google is up and running, all these good things, the iTunes store is operational before we show Unit 1 to get feedback. We spend an enormous amount of time and effort in building the prototype. So part of Lean is you don't want to do that. You want just the minimum set to start getting